Hey there, this is Alex Kluge. I'm here from Toronto Home Experts, and I'm here to dive into the November 2022 Toronto real estate market update. Now, before we dive into the numbers, what we're going to do today is really see if we can identify a trend. What's happening with prices, what's happening with sales volume, and what are some key indicators that we can look at to identify what is actually happening in the marketplace and where is it going in the next few months. Okay. So sales volume is always a great indicator in terms of like how healthy is the real estate market in terms of sales. Now, don't forget, we're going to be comparing against last year's sales volume for November, which, as we all know, 2021 was a record-breaking real estate year for Toronto real estate. So it's not the best comparable to use, but still, we want to identify some trends. So, what happened is, wow, we're down 50% from sales volume. Does that mean prices are crashing? It actually doesn't. And we're going to sort of dive into some of the metrics and why that's not happening. So, if you watched our video last month, I said that typically volume decreases from October to November. And why is that? Because, the fall market, quote unquote, is coming to a close. Winter's coming, and typically we see sellers take their properties off the market. And conversely, buyers also stop shopping for properties, once the late fall and early winter happens. So really, November is a slower month, which is not unusual. And, what's interesting is over the last 20 years, sales volume has always gone down from October to November. Did it go down again this month? It did. But actually, it was a very small decrease compared to what we've seen in other years. And why might that be? And I think, once we get into, talking about the average price, and you'll see some trends there, I think that'll be a key indicator to say that, really our market is pretty much flatlined, and it's stabilized, which actually I think is a good thing. Um, and why is that a good thing? We saw a huge run up in price at the end of 2021 towards March 2022. And then we saw a pretty significant decline, from call it April to July. And then it's been flat since then. So that's actually a good thing, right? We haven't seen further declines despite, a fairly rapid increase in mortgage rates. Interest rates have gone up significantly from where they are at the beginning of the year. And that's a pretty important consideration because what happens when we have rising interest rates, affordability decreases, right? So affordability has decreased significantly for buyers. And so what that means is there's fewer buyers in the market that are able and willing to take on a mortgage to purchase a property. And we're seeing that firsthand as active agents in the market. Okay, so in terms of active listings, again, active listings is another metric. And it's funny, when you actually look at this, when we look at active listings from this month compared to last month, you would say, wow, okay, active listings are up significantly. Sales are down significantly, like vis-a-vis where we were last year and also where we were last month. That would tend to indicate, like most economists would suggest, well, that's probably going to result in a price decline. But we actually didn't see that, which I find super, super fascinating. And this is actually something that we've seen as a trend basically since July. Like we've seen like basically a dichotomy, like sales volume and active listings kind of going separate ways. Whereas in a bull market like we saw in 2021, that was decreasing. Like we saw sales volume increase while active listings go down. So that was super interesting, and I find that fascinating, and I have some theories in terms of why that is. Okay, but we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, new listings are down, from last year, and that really doesn't say too much. But where we are relative to active listings versus new listings, we basically are able to now determine a metric called sales to new listings ratio, and I think that to me is probably one of the most important metrics to look at in the market right now. So typically speaking, sales to new listings, if last year we were in the like mid to high 60s, depending on the month. And this year, November, we were actually just over 50%. I think we're at 52%, which is actually, a good number because it shows that we've got effectively balanced. Like, we're in a balanced market right now. Like, it's not quote unquote a buyer's market. Like, I know a lot of the press has been suggesting that, there's properties selling at huge discounts. And yeah, they are selling at discounts from where they were in February, but those prices really weren't real, in my opinion. Like, it was a very frothy market back then. So it's really, you can't really take that point in time in terms of saying like, okay, that's really where, prices, I mean, yes, prices, average prices were there at that point, but in terms of like market reality and in terms of what, buyers willing to pay and sellers are willing to sell for, that really, it was a very small snapshot in time. So you can't put up too much weight. So where was I going with the sales to new listings ratio? So we're at, call it 52%. That's a balanced market. Anything under 50%, we now become more towards a buyer's market. Like, I would personally be concerned if we were somewhere around like 30%, somewhere 35%, somewhere around there, then that's a legitimate buyer's market. And that's where we're going to see average prices decline, because there's only like a third of listings that are being absorbed. And what happens then, listings grow, right? There's inventory that keeps on growing, and sales is only taking up, a small portion of that. So anyways, what my message here is, I'm seeing this as, one of the reasons why prices have not declined is we're in a balanced market, despite active listings and new listings increasing, and sales volume, is essentially flat. I mean, it's down slightly from the previous month, and it's been on a slight increase since July, which, as I mentioned last month, was, a healthy trend. But, make no mistake, this is not like, I'm not suggesting here that, this is going to turn around tomorrow and like, prices are going to skyrocket in 2023. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what I'm seeing now is, we've got basically a, like, stability. I think stability is the right word in the market. Like, could there be, another decline in prices in 2023? Like, yeah, maybe. Certainly it's possible, especially if the recession that we're going to see in 2023 becomes very deep, which I'm not necessarily a believer in, to be honest. I think it's going to be a mild ish recession. So I'm not suggesting that we're going to see like another, 25% drop. Like, I don't see that happening. But, could prices go down like in the next few months by like 2 to 5%? Yeah, it's not unreasonable. Like, it's certainly not unreasonable. But, really, what two main factors are, you know, uh, what's going to happen with interest rates? Like, are we now at high end of where rates are going to be for the foreseeable future? That would be an encouraging sign. Like, I don't think rates are coming down, in the short term. I think we're probably looking at end of 2023 before rates come down. So that will be another indicator that will help propel the market, but I don't see that happening in the short term. And yeah, so that's basically why we're seeing the price trends that we're getting. And now I'm talking about price because I know I've talked about it basically this whole video leading up to this point. But I think it's important to understand, like, you can't take one of these metrics in a vacuum. You have to look at it together, and what story is it telling you? So I think if we combine like all the things I've talked about, like sales and new listings ratio, like, volume trends, new listings trends, that'll help us understand why prices are where they are. So prices are, I was going to say, oh, prices are down 7% from last year. Like, as I said, like, we were in a bull market, and again, this is average price, so this is not necessarily indicative of like what's actually happening in like pockets of the city. Like, you have to look at some areas. Like, I think from what I've seen anyways, like Toronto proper has actually done surprisingly well, and it's held up the strongest. And that's because, prices did not, escalate in, the 416 as aggressively as they did in the 905. Like, some of the regions, like, this is a Barrie video, but like, where we're talking about Collingwood and Barrie, like, we saw some massive increases, in 2020 and 2021, like, just due to like lifestyle change and, people moving out of the city because of the pandemic and all that stuff. Like, whereas Toronto had a little bit more of a muted growth. now we're seeing like that actually is helping the market. So if if you're looking at Toronto, but like yes, outside regions perform less. But one actually interesting trend is York region, actually, of all markets for November specifically, actually performed the best. So Toronto was number two, York region actually in terms of sales volume, which I think is really, really interesting. And actually, that's when we saw the average prices held up the strongest as those two markets. So anyway, something to keep an eye on for early next year. Are we going to see those two markets, Toronto and York region, perform the best in 2023? Maybe, but that's an early indication that might be happening. But anyway, stay tuned for that. I'm not ready to make any proclamations or any predictions at this point on that yet, but just an interesting trend that I noticed for this month. Okay, so average home prices, this is actually interesting. When you look at this, like as I said, prices are flat since July. Like average price of property in the Greater Toronto area was $1,074,000, and in November it's $1,079,000. So like I think we're probably going to see continued flatlining, certainly through the winter. The question is, what's going to happen, come February, March? Are we going to start seeing, an increase or maybe a decrease? I don't know. It's going to depend on what happens with those other two factors, like I mentioned: interest rates, inflation, is it coming under control, and the economy. How healthy are we at that point, and what's consumer confidence like? But as you can see here, prices are down 0.9%. I did predict last month that actually prices would be down a little bit. I was, sort of hoping to see a slight increase, but you know what? Like we're talking about $10,000 on like on a almost $1.1 million average price. It's really like it's really a rounding error. But anyway, so interesting. I find this trend fascinating. I'm really, really curious to see where we are. December, I'm expecting more of the same, but January onwards is going to be really a fascinating market in terms of where we are and where we're heading. So actually, you should stay tuned. In January, I am going to put together my market prediction video. So that'll be something to keep an eye out for. And I'm excited to share it. And I'll also talk about my predictions from last year and how we did. So that's another interesting thing to look out for. But anyways, I am going to talk about days on market really quickly. Like, we're up 22 days on average days on market. Like I talked about, sales to new listings ratio shows that we're, in a balanced market. 22 days on market on average is very much a balanced market. Still, if we're in the 50 to 60 day range, that would be concerning. But again, this is just something to monitor and keep an eye out on a cursory level. Okay, so thank you so much for watching our video. As always, we're loving the questions. We're getting a ton of emails these days. So, feel free to reach out to us by, as I said, email or our social channels. We love the feedback. If there's anything that you'd like to see or questions specific to you, what's happening in your pocket, your neighborhood, and how these numbers are affecting you, please reach out to us. Be happy to answer your questions. Thanks so much for reaching out, and we'll see you again next month.